Hey guys, welcome back. It's Mr. Schultz from East Mech again. I promise I'm not going to do all of these video lectures. You just happen to get a lot of me in the beginning. So today, what we're going to be talking about are, or I should say, what we are going to talk about is Italian Renaissance versus Middle Age artwork. And the reason this is kind of super important is because the reality is this: we always look at the Italian Renaissance and hold it up with such high regard. It's so good, it's so talented, it's so amazing. But the reality is this: is it amazing? What makes this period so different and so much more significant than any other art period that has ever happened? Why does it matter more than anything else? So, we're going to dive into that today. All right, so what you'll need is you'll need your Middle Age versus Renaissance art handout sheet. Basically, it's a chart. We'll take some notes. You'll do the notes at the top where we'll break down the different differences between Middle Ages and Renaissance. And then you're going to look at some art samples and you're going to have to tell me or us, is this Middle Ages or Renaissance and why, and be specific. So your assignment, the thing you're getting credit for today, is you're going to be turning in this sheet where we're looking for the notes and we're looking for your analysis. All right, now that sounds really scary, really daunting, but I promise you, if you stick with us, you will understand the difference pretty easily. And it's going to be pretty obvious when you really start looking at it, right? Cool. All right, so first of all, let's talk about what the Renaissance was, right? Because again, it's held in such high regard, it's not really clear what it means. So, yeah, there's a textbook definition for you. The Renaissance was a renewed interest in ideas, art, and writing from the classical era. So, what does that basically mean? So, let's be a little bit more direct. After the Middle Ages, or excuse me, after the fall of Rome, we had the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, as we've talked about before, was this period where there was very little growth in terms of art, culture, technology, at least in the beginning. By the end of the Middle Ages, you're seeing some pretty impressive stuff because there has to be, because the Renaissance just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? And you'll see that more clearly later. So basically, what it means is the people in the Renaissance looked back at the Greeks and the Romans and said, "This is awesome. Let's do more of this." And so we're going to take a quick second here and we're going to look at a couple of sculptures, and you might want to take a moment and think about, all right, is that from ancient Greece slash Rome, or is that from the Italian Renaissance? So let's take a quick look. All right, so here are the first two. If we look at them and we remember what we learned about Greek sculptures and Greek art, this kind of looks like they both look like they could be from the same time period, right? We got, well, if we want to be classy about it, nudity, but there's other names for it as well. But again, if we look at it, so we both have that stuff going on right there, and we have these naked bodies with muscles and everything. So, which one would be considered from the classical period, the Greeks and the Romans, and which one's from the Italian Renaissance? Well, I started us off a little easy here. This one over here, this is a very famous one. It's called David, or if you want to be pretentious, David. Um, and this is a very famous Italian Renaissance sculpture. But if we look at the two of them side by side, yeah, it's pretty obvious that they kind of look a lot alike. All right, let's look at another two. Again, you wouldn't necessarily know from just looking at them what makes the one different from the other, right? So here's a little clue for you. So this one over here, again, I wouldn't expect you to know this. This is Dionysus. This is the god of wine. And how can I tell? Because this guy looks super duper happy. And that right there is his wine cup. Anyway, my point is this. The thing I'm trying to drive home to you is this, that essentially classic period and Italian Renaissance look a lot alike, all right, in terms of these sculptures. Now let's dive a little bit deeper, right? Now that we know what the Italian Renaissance is about, let's make sure we understand what makes the Italian Renaissance different than what the period was before it, which was the Middle Ages. So using your charts that you have in front of you, right? There's one side says Middle Ages, the other side says Renaissance. So if you look over here, I've given you these different subjects that we want to be jotting down some notes. I'm going to kind of expand on each one of them a little bit, so you might add a little bit more than what I'm saying here. Also, quick note, it might be worth pausing just to make sure you don't miss anything that I'm saying. All right, so first of all, subject matter. Subject is another fancy way of saying what is it about? And so typically in the Middle Ages, you're going to find things that are religiously driven. That makes a lot of sense, right? Think about it. In the Middle Ages, we're talking about a time period where the church is beginning to emerge as the one and powerful unifying force who has money. And so they have money to buy art. So, of course, they're going to buy art that talks about religion. And so here's the thing. If we start looking at this one over here, as I have my note says, meant to celebrate God, not just be pretty. So that will make more sense as we get later into the Renaissance. But in the Middle Ages, the artwork was really meant to inspire people to be kind of divinely moved, to look at artwork and go, oh, I see the presence of God in that, right? That's what they're looking for. All right. The other thing that kind of defines religious artwork from the time period is this. They're kind of hard to miss, right? These big, huge yellow circles around their heads. I like to call them dinner plates because, well, what else would they look like? These are supposed to be halos. Now, when you get later into artwork and they develop the skill set, the halo will kind of then become this like 3D thing that floats over their head. But at this time period, we're basically looking at dinner plates. It looks like someone glued to the back of their head. Now, terms of techniques, some pretty interesting topics we want to go over. Babies. Yeah, babies. Now, real talk, they don't make a lot of paintings about just random babies. They make paintings about one very specific baby, the Jesus. So they make these paintings about Jesus, but here's the thing, like if you know what babies look like, they've got those rolls, they look like the Michelin man, they're kind of fat. The reality is they don't really look fat. They look at just like shrunken humans, very shrunken, angry humans. So they're not that chubby thing that you think of a baby having, right? But almost always, that baby's going to be Jesus. All right. Another clue that you're looking at Middle Ages stuff is that the main subject tends to be a little bit bigger. What it means is the main subject will be right smack in the middle, all right, and they will be a little bit bigger, so you know what you should be looking at. And we'll look at a couple of examples a little bit later, so you can kind of see the stuff in play. And then clothing. There's a pretty good example right here. These people are trying; they're trying so hard, all right. But do yourself a favor right now. Stop and look down at the clothing on your body and look at how it sits on your body right now. All right, your clothing has these folds and crevices. Just everybody does, right? No one's clothing looks like this up and down flat sheet. And you can kind of look at this and see a little bit right here. These are supposed to be like the creases of your clothing laying on a body, but that just doesn't look like that, right? And again, we'll look at an example a little bit, and you'll get a better understanding of that. And the last thing in terms of technique I want to talk about is there's no appearance of depth, right? Um, Depth basically means what makes something look closer versus further away. And so if we look over here, these weird, bizarre humps in the background, these are supposed to be hills. This is supposed to indicate that that's further away. But here's the thing, they don't look any different in size. So they just look like weird humps in the background. If you were finding something that was further away in terms of more modern painting techniques, it's going to get smaller, right? And that makes sense, right? If you look at something that's far, far away, it looks smaller than if it was in front of you. And so they just haven't mastered the technique yet. Now, oil, in terms of materials, no oil paints, right? Oil paints are incredibly important in this process because what they let you do is they allow you to add a little bit of darkness or add a little bit of lightness to kind of create the shading technique. And that doesn't exist, which is why, if you can, looking at this painting, you see this all very greenish looking thing right here. All right. And then the last thing it's worth mentioning is sculptures. There's no really freestanding sculptures or nudes. Like the things we just looked at, they definitely wouldn't have made those. Why? Because go back up here. Religiously speaking, being naked isn't all that modest, so they probably don't want to see a lot of naked people. All right, let's move on to Renaissance art. All right, so the Renaissance is still, in terms of subject matter, going to be very much about religion, right? You're going to see lots of Jesus, lots of Mary. Um, but here's the thing, you begin to see other stuff too, and this is what we want to focus on here. We're going to see nature and normal people. So we'll get into this later, but nature is going to be more of a northern renaissance. That'll make more sense later. And normal people, guess what? As we talked about in the last video, people now have money, right? They have money they want to spend. And as much as they want to buy artwork, people are really kind of vain and selfish. They want to buy artwork that looks like themselves. So people start buying self portraits. All right. And then the other thing is, too, As I said before, the Renaissance is about Greek and Roman culture, so they're going to pick some Greek and Roman subject matter and they're going to include it in their artwork. Now, in terms of technique, I think the Mona Lisa, super famous painting, most valuable painting in the world. Is it pretty? Sure, I guess. All right, but here's what you want to notice: the clothing. Look at her arms right here, right? And then look it down at if you're wearing a shirt or whatever you're wearing right now. You'll notice that there's those wrinkles that of the cloth kind of laying over your body, and you can see it here, right? That's kind of how clothing sits on a body. It just folds over left and right versus the last thing we looked at, where it's just kind of this straight sheet that goes up and down. So that's a good clue that you're looking at Renaissance art. All right, bodies have normal size and look. This will make more sense when we talk about the idea that like whoever the major subject is smack in the middle and really big usually. Mona Lisa looks kind of at the right size, but this makes more sense when we look at things with lots of different subjects or lots of different items in it. Use lighting to focus on the subject. So notice how Mona Lisa, her face is nice and bright, right? You see that right there? But down here is kind of shadowed. Again, this isn't portrait, so it's a little bit easier to tell. But when you look at certain paintings, you'll notice that like the light focuses on the thing you're supposed to look at. Why? Because it's a trick. If it's the brightest thing, you're going to notice it. All right, and then lastly, we look in the background. You see all the stuff back here? Those are all little trees. But here's the thing, they're little trees. They're small trees, which means they're further away. And here, look at this. Look at this little road. The road winds back further and further and further and further, telling us that this is getting further and further, further away. And what makes all this possible right down here? Oil paints. The fact that you see all these different, she's wearing a brown shirt, but it's different shades. Why? Because the oil paints, you can manipulate it and make it a different color brown for everything you're doing instead of just one. All right. And then if there were sculptures, they were typically freestanding and pretty much always nude because that's how they roll. All right, so if we're looking at this painting right here, this piece of artwork right here, it's called the Holy Mother. If we have to guess what time period it's from, I hope you can tell based on what we talked about that this is going to be from the Middle Ages. A couple big clues. First of all, look at the clothing, right? Some wrinkles, but for the most part, super duper flat. Also, the subject matter, and right in the smack in the middle, is ginormous, so much bigger than everything else. And then we have this. That's baby Jesus. He looks very angry. But this he is not like a baby. He's more like a very angry small man. And then of course we got dinner plates telling those are halos. And oh yeah, this artist is actually quite brilliant. See all these little streaks right here? They're all designed to draw your attention right smack in the middle. So, oh, one more thing I didn't mention before that was worth noting. The faces, if you kind of look at them, they're all kind of super the same, super generic, meaning that's another good sign that you're looking at the Middle Ages. All right, next one. All right. The Adoration of the Magi. If you can't tell this is Renaissance, you'll eat. All right. So clothing. Look at the folds on this whatever is a shirt. I guess a shirt. Yeah, sure. Uh, it just folds like clothing would naturally if you're wearing a weird cape for some reason. Oh, another thing to look for is see this right here. See these arches, right? That's just them showing off, and these details right here in this artwork right here. Um, but here's the thing: what makes this truly an example of Renaissance art is that they're just throwing every cool technique they know at you. We got wrinkled clothing, we got perspective and depth in the background. There's some strange little castle. Um, and you can also see that like these arches are designed to bring your attention down to here, but it's really hard to kind of find what to focus on. Plus, there's that weird thing right there. All right. So here's what I'm asking you to do. You find that slideshow on Canvas or Google Classroom, and what you're going to do is you're going to look at there's 5 of them. You need to break them down. You need to basically use the techniques, the things we different talk, whether we're talking about techniques, subject matter, material, whatever it is you think it's made out of, right? You want to use that middle section of the chart to break that down and be specific. And then you want to identify what period, Middle Ages or Renaissance. Now, warning, a couple of the things in the middle are middle. That means there's a transition period. All right, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to look at the artwork and the slideshow posted on Canvas. You will then turn in the notes you just took and the chart you're going to fill out. We're going to be grading you looking for your ability to want to identify the time period, but also identify the specific details that clearly make up that time period. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.